Hello everyone and welcome to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. I am the Grumpy Surfer and your host, Adz Lyson. As always, before we start the podcast this week, I've got a couple of discounts. So to get a discount on any of the OMBI surf programs, so OMBI are a surfing program that teach beginners and intermediates to improve their surfing, to link the turns together, to relax a lot more, to get more spray when you're surfing and look like the pros. Go to ombe.co/ref/grumpy surfer to get 10% off any of the programs, so go and check them out. Also, last podcast was with Steve Gwennin, so if you want 10% off his Surf Life Club program, which is designed to help you surf more and work less, use the code TGSPSLC to get 10% off his programs as well. So, which leads me on to the podcast this week. This week's podcast is with the owner of Fightworx Martial Arts Academy here in the UK. He's a third degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. He's run his own academy now for 13 years and has trained in many, many different martial arts and has got a breadth of knowledge throughout the martial art community. So, please enjoy my conversation with an amazing bloke, Darren Yeoman. Darren Yeoman, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adz. Appreciate it.
3 questions before we start. How are you? Where are we? And are you training today?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, doing great at the moment, all things considered over the last few years. We're currently in our new Fightworx Academy location in Torquay. And no, I'm not training today. I've just got over a bit of a back injury, so I've got to force myself to stay off the mats for a few more days yet.
It's one of those things when, as you get a little bit older and you're still training and stuff, is having to deal with all those injury issues.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's ever a time these days when I get on the mat and I'm not carrying some kind of injury or tweak. You just learn to live with it, I think.
How have you found opening this the new academy a little bit closer into Torquay?
Do you know what? We needed to move from our old academy because we outgrew it essentially. And the fact that we were able to renovate the place over the sort of the pandemic time when everything else was shut down was quite convenient for us. And it's been a huge success. Like, since everything's opened up again, I have never seen a time where so many people want to come and train Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai, but mainly Jiu-Jitsu is the one that's taken off the most. It's been, the uptake's been tremendous recently.
Yeah, your beginners classes, you seem to have like 30 or 40 people just turning up in the beginners classes.
Yeah, I mean, Mondays we're regularly getting 40 white belts on the mat every single Monday. I love Mondays. There's so much like enthusiasm and all these new hungry white belts on the mats. And yeah, I really love seeing so many people getting involved in Jiu-Jitsu these days. It's awesome.
How do you think, or why do you think that's happening? Is that down to your promotion in the local area, or just do you think because, I mean, I promote, my school that I've just opened, I promote it as one of the fastest growing sports in the world, which kind of technically is.
Yeah.
So why do you find that? Why do you think that more people are training or coming to look to train now?
Well, I think the main reason is that it's just a lot more mainstream now, right? People are a lot more aware of what MMA is, UFC, things like that. You got people like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand talking about jiu-jitsu on their podcasts. I do ask people when they come in how they found out about jiu-jitsu, because it still confuses the hell out of me. It's like, how did you find out about this? Why do you want to do this? And most people say, they've got a friend that does it. They've heard about it on a podcast. They're a MMA fan. So I think it's the sort of the mainstream popularity of jiu-jitsu, MMA, and locally, obviously, we've got quite a few members now. So I think there's definitely that kind of snowball effect. The more members we have, the more people hear about it. And we do put a lot of work into social media and stuff as well. So it's several different things, I think.
Yeah, one of the main reasons that I put a women's class on was some friends of ours or guys that were in the kids' school. I told them I was going to start something up, and they said, "Well, are you going to do women's classes?" And she started to talk about, she's in like the fitness industry with her husband, and she said she was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and he said that doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was very good for like strength training and helping with strength training. And I was a little bit like, I looked at, maybe not. Don't think you're looking at it in the right manner. But she was one of the main reasons why I decided to put those classes on as well.
Ah, right. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, people do get into it for lots of different reasons. And I got to kind of remind myself of that sometimes, because the way that we train, it kind of is mainly, I guess, geared towards kind of competition style jiu-jitsu. But I have to often remind myself that a lot of people start jiu-jitsu because they want to do it for self-defense, right? So we wind it back sometimes and take it back to the fundamentals and the basics and what jiu-jitsu was originally developed for. But yeah, lots of people want to do it for health and fitness, some for self-defense, confidence building. I tend to find that the biggest aspect, the biggest gains that people get from jiu-jitsu is the social aspect. You know, all the camaraderie, the friendship groups they make. I think that's what they tend to benefit from it the most.
I think if you've got an academy like your place is now, I mean, obviously you've taken it, you know, we had this conversation last week about developing an academy and how to get people through your door and how to promote that. So why do people need technically your product? Because, you know, you'd be a bit daft to go into having an environment like this where you're getting customers or clients coming through the door to not have that business mentality behind it. So having and built something up from what I'm trying to do at the moment, from the grassroots level to where you are now, it must be quite an accomplishing feeling to feel that actually, you know, you've done something that you enjoy doing, and now, you know, you're making a career and a business out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have to remind myself to step back sometimes and look at kind of how we've grown over the last, I guess, 10 or 12 years as an actual business. Yeah, it must be coming up to about 12 years now. And yeah, it's developed hugely from when we started training in a little dance studio with half a dozen people that just like tearing lumps out of each other. It's great. It's very rewarding looking at the development, all the different people that are out there competing. One of the things I take great pride in is, it's not so much, I mean, it's fantastic that so many people are going out there and winning medals at competitions and things like that. But one of the proudest achievements is to see people who come in, who make dramatic changes in their lifestyle, you know, whether they're overweight, lacking in confidence, all that kind of stuff. And then you see them over the years kind of flourish into this new evolved version of themselves. And there's so many instances of that. Like, that's something that really stands out for me. And I think the reputation of any academy is one of the most important things. And I think when people talk about your academy and the good experiences that they've had in the community, and their friends can see what it's done for them, this is a lot of feedback we get quite often. In fact, recently we put like a survey online. It was really a survey. It's like a questionnaire to get people to comment on some of the benefits, some of the things they like and dislike about the academy. And some of the comments that came back, they were lovely. Like, some of the experiences people have had, some of the way they think about the academy and the coaches, and they tell their friends that, you know, and then their friends think, oh, do you know what? Maybe it's not such a rough place. Maybe I can go down there and train, you know, because there's still that stigma around combat sports, the whole kind of blood, sweat and tears, spit and sawdust, you know, all that kind of stigma around it. And I've worked so hard over the last 12 years or so to get rid of all that, you know, to get rid of the chains and skulls and blood and, you know, elitism and, you know, ostracizing the people who need it the most. In fairness, you know, the people who are anxious, you know, the people who really need something to build their confidence and their fitness. So, yeah, I think getting rid of that stigma and making it available to people who really need it, that's a big part of the development of the academy, I think.
I think one of the big key things to take away from a martial art or an academy like yours at Fightworx is the fact that, you know, and others around here, you know, you got Flow Martial Arts where I used to train with Kenny down there.
Yep.
You've got a few other ones down towards Nuki. Even if you're looking at guys that train at SPG and some of the other big academies that are pushing people through, you know, into the UFC and into MMA. Unlike football, where you've got professionals that only train with their teammates, you know, they don't train with anyone that aren't as good as them. I think the beauty of this is that if you're a super high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know, world champion, you're still training with the white belt that comes through the door to your academy or somebody else's academy, and you're rubbing off on that experience. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, look at the guys at the moment out in Texas, the Royal Marines Jiu-Jitsu team. So they're training like that with the likes of, you know, Gordon Ryan, loads of guys out there that are super, super high level that are actually teaching them and taking the time out to talk to them. And I don't think you would get that in any other sport or walk of life, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. There's something about jiu-jitsu in particular that creates this kind of this familiarity all over the world. You know, you can go anywhere, train with anybody. Well, I say anybody. For the most part, academies are all very similar in that they all have this core love for jiu-jitsu, and then they want to pass that on and train with other people, because I think you have to be fairly like-minded. You know, you could be a competitor or you could be someone who's doing it for self-defense, but at its core, there's a certain kind of honesty about jiu-jitsu, and people who can't cope with being smashed around on the mats on a daily basis, they're not the same type of person. They've gone through a similar experience, and they recognize that and respect that in other people who practice jiu-jitsu.
We'll come back to talking to this in a minute, because I'd love to talk a little bit about your background. So, where were you born, and where did you grow up, and how did you get into martial arts to start with?
Okay, so I was born in Torquay. So I've lived here most of my life. I spent a couple of years away in Reading, but what got me into martial arts? I gotta say Bruce Lee movies. It was definitely Bruce Lee movies. As soon as I saw my first Bruce Lee movie, that was it, man. I was punching and kicking everything I could find. And initially, I wanted to do Muay Thai. That was my first sort of martial arts desire. But I was too anxious as a kid. I never actually walked in through the gym door and started taking it up. So when did I start? I guess it was when I joined the army in 2000. I mean, I've missed a part here. Wrestling, WWE wrestling. It was called WWF back then. But in primary school, we used to wrestle like crazy every single day. Every time, we couldn't wait for the lessons to finish so we could get out in the playground and start wrestling with each other. And that, I think, is probably where it started. Yeah. So yeah, wrestling all the time. I've always sort of naturally enjoyed and been fairly good at wrestling. And then over the years, when I turned 18 and I joined the army, I took up judo. And I think that's when I properly started pursuing grappling, because that was around about the same time that I saw the first UFCs come out. And as soon as I saw Royce Gracie, like many jiu-jitsu practitioners, as soon as I saw Royce Gracie out there beating people like twice his size, I had to do it. So I just got addicted to grappling, trained judo, watched the UFC, didn't really understand it, but we still grappled with each other. And then, where did it go from there? There wasn't much around in Torquay. Like, there wasn't much in the country back then in terms of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling. So I bumped into a guy called Paul Carthy, which is another black belt here. And he was running a small academy in Paynton called CEA Torquay, and he did a mixture of kickboxing, eskrima, and some grappling. So when I joined his club, we started grappling lots, and just kind of I don't know really how it happened, but we just kind of ended up leaning more towards the grappling arts than the striking arts. And then we started traveling around to visit other academies. So if a Brazilian black belt was in the country at the time, Gordinho used to go to Manchester quite a lot, and I think he used to come over with Ben Poppleton. So we used to zip up to Manchester when he came over to go and do a seminar with him. We nipped up to London when Carlos Gracie Jr. came over. So when we wanted to train jiu-jitsu with some higher level jiu-jitsu practitioners, we had to travel halfway across the country to go and be able to do that. So yeah, further down the line, more and more Brazilians came over, and yeah, it just started to take off. But the Southwest was always 10 years behind everywhere else, so it took a long time to grow jiu-jitsu in the Southwest.
It's quite interesting because there's a lot of high level guys in the Southwest now.
Yeah.
Including yourself, because you're one of the you're one of the longest serving Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, by a few other people around here, and it's quite interesting to listen to that story about, it was very, very similar. People got into judo and then they saw the UFC. It is a very, very sort of like similar line of approach and thought. And, you joined the army in 2000. I joined the Royal Marines in 2000. But
Right.
I got into jiu-jitsu really late. So I got into jiu-jitsu back in 2013 or 14.
Okay.
So I'd been in the military a long time already, and I'd done something that we do in the Marines. I say something we do. I've left now. I used to do. I don't know how to say it. Anyway, I'm digressing. Royal Marines Close Combat, which is, teaching people how to fight with kit on, room entries, taking people down, and all that sort of thing. So
course, yeah.
I did that course. And I fucking hated it. Hated it. Only purely for the fact that the very first day we did 5-minute rounds with 5 different people, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And after that 25 minutes, I sat in the corner of a squash court and I was nearly crying because I hurt so much. And it really put me off for 3 or 4 years.
All right.
And it wasn't until I had a chat with Martin Stapleton, Stapes.
Oh, Stapes, yeah.
Yeah, who kind of said, yeah, give it a go. Because I was looking to do something in between surfing when the swells weren't good. And I just kind of stuck to it. In retrospect, I kind of wish I'd pursued something like that a little bit younger.
Oh yeah.
But
don't we all?
but on the hindsight of it, would I still be doing it now? I don't know. But you can't look on back and things like that. But from my perspective, even when I started training, in Exeter, there was only 5 or 6 people like on a club that had been training, 5 or 6, 7 years before I'd even started. And now, looking at your place here, there's, we're in the middle of a day on a Monday, and there's, people on the mat doing lots of different martial arts, and, evening classes. We're talking about 40, 50 people training in beginners classes.
Yeah.
That was but a pipe dream. I'd love to have had 40 or 50 people to train with when I first started, and now it's just kind of, it's so good to see.
Yeah, it's so different now. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think the levels changed now a lot as well. I don't like to say it, but I think when I was a blue belt, I wasn't half as good as some of the blue belts we get these days. The technical level of jiu-jitsu, and I think again that's because so many more people train jiu-jitsu these days. There's so much more experience on the mats that it just keeps pushing the level up.
I've kind of taken us off on the tangent, haven't I?
That's
right. When did you feel like you wanted to start your own place up and start teaching and coaching?
Okay, so I never wanted to coach. That was never an interest of mine at all. But when I was training back with Paul Carthy, he just kind of like dropped me in it one day. He just kind of like, oh, Darren will teach this class. I'm busy. I got to shoot off. And I was like, what the hell? So he gave me the confidence and he pushed me into this kind of coaching role. And because the pair of us were grappling all the time, and we were white belts at the time, we didn't really know our ass from our elbow. But what we did know, we'd try and pass on to the others. And I guess that's where it started. At the time, I was working in engineering. So I was in this engineering company for about 10 years, and I got fed up with it, like working in the daytime and then training jiu-jitsu in the evenings. I wanted to train more, and I didn't enjoy my job. So rather than sit there and sulk about it, I decided, do you know what? I'm going to give it a go. So I leased an industrial unit, and I just went for it. I quit my job, and all the fees that we were paying to rent this dance studio at the time to run the club out of, it amounted essentially to the rent on a lease for a unit. So I thought, right, let's just go for it. So I maxed out my credit cards, bought a load of mats, bought a load of wood, renovated this unit, and turned it into an academy. And that's where it all started. And ever since I've done that, it's just grown. More and more people have become interested in training. I've got a lot older, but now to see where it's come over the last 12 years, I've never looked back. I've never been happier than working for myself and doing something that I love. It's easy. I mean, everything's work, right? It's hard work at times. It's you're never going to be rich running an academy or anything like that. But I feel like I've got a much better quality of life now, and I really enjoy coaching people and seeing people develop. It's very gratifying.
I love that perspective that you've just shown there, that it takes a lot of guts to quit a job and go and do the thing that you want to do. And I've talked about this quite a lot. It's kind of almost borderlines a mental health issue as well, really, doesn't it? Because, if you want to stereotype it and call it the rat race, there's loads of people that are stuck in jobs that they don't want to do, and they're scared.
Yeah.
They're scared of leaving something and pursuing what they want to do, because it is a really scary aspect of life, right?
It is, yeah.
These days as well, because money is such a big and a big tight thing, especially with the economy and the situation where it is now, more so than ever, are those internal and external pressures on finances and life that almost kind of like fix you in this one line of thinking.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. It's everyone's kind of forced in this particular direction. And I mean, let's face it, we've got so much opportunity in this country. It's easy to have the fear of failing, the fear of, being homeless and things like that. But we don't live in a third world country. We've got so much opportunity, and to not try to do something, to not sort of take that plunge in a place where you've got so much opportunity, you're only going to ever look back and regret not having given it a go. So, I thought, yeah, you should do it. If anyone's thinking about it, just do it. Give it a try.
I always find this question quite interesting because I saw a documentary about the John Danaher, what were they called? The John Danaher team.
Oh, the Death Squad.
Yeah, the Danaher Death Squad.
Yeah.
So some of them have sort of like parted ways and become the B team.
Yeah.
Right. So they decided, instead of calling it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they renamed it American Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
So how do you see it these days? Is it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu still? Is it American? Is it British Jiu-Jitsu? Or is it just Jiu-Jitsu? What is it? Because, from the time that the Gracies brought it over from Brazil over to America, and then it's kind of just, tethered in a spider web around the world. What is it now?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult one. I think at its core, all grappling arts are pretty much the same. It's all grappling. My particular style of jiu-jitsu, I guess you could say, is a combination of judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo, freestyle wrestling. Any grappling art that is useful and effective, just put it all together and call it jiu-jitsu. It doesn't really matter, to be fair. I don't call it Brazilian jiu-jitsu too often. I just call it jiu-jitsu. Because I think it's an amalgamation of all sorts of grappling arts. You've got all the the leg locks, you've got the takedowns. It's developed so much over the last few decades that everybody wants to put their flag in it, right, and call it their own. But I think it's just grappling, you know? That's how I view it.
I used to call it jiu-jitsu, but now I'm trying to promote my own school.
Right, yeah.
I'm having to go back and call it, and I don't know why. This is going to sound really weird. Even since I started training, I hate calling it BJJ.
Yeah.
It's just like, it just doesn't like, even now, like in my chest, it's really weird. I feel like I want to vomit in my mouth a little bit. Like, why am I calling it BJJ? Why is it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? I'm not Brazilian. I'm not in Brazil. I'm in, I live in the Southwest. Like,
it's just good branding, right?
Yeah, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
The Gracies called it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because they were Brazilian.
Yeah.
But, I've learnt from somebody that's English, that's British. Is it English Jiu-Jitsu? I mean, I just call it Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, that's it, I think. Essentially, I mean, we get people coming through the door that say they want to learn Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I have to explain the differences between what we do and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and all these preconceived ideas of like online gradings and all the different directions that Jiu-Jitsu's gone in these days. Everybody's got a different idea of what they want from it and what it is to them. But I think essentially at its core, it's just grappling. I don't like calling it BJJ either. It's just branding, isn't it? It doesn't really matter. I always tried to avoid putting my name on the academy, because I think it's more than that. It's beyond me, So having an academy name and having Jiu-Jitsu at Fightworx Academy, it's a generic term. And then when people come down, we can kind of explain what it is that we do. Everybody's jiu-jitsu is different, right? But at its core, it's all just grappling. You kind of started to tether on it a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about JiuJitsu Politics with you. Because I know you said, you're quite opinionated with this. Yeah.
And we had a conversation last week about this as well. And I'm very much about training anywhere.
Yeah.
My mentality is I try and brand it as jiu-jitsu's for everybody, whether you're old, you're young, you're a kid, whatever demographic you want to put yourself in, it's for everybody. So I've talked to a few other black belts over the years, and their coaches are very much, you can't go and train anywhere else. You can't coach anywhere else. You have to be with our academy, with our brand. You buy our gis. You only train here. If you go anywhere else, you have to ask your instructor or your coach or your professor to go and do that. But I find that kind of mentality, and it's very much an old school mentality, I think, even though I've never trained old school, whatever. It's very much like, it narrows it all down a little bit and almost kind of is off-putting for other people, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think loyalty's earned, right? It's not demanded. And I've always found over the years, everybody wants to put their flag in you. Everybody wants to own you, so you're their property. And I think it should be a lot more open than that. These days, students are customers. If you run a business and your student comes to the door and pays you money to teach them, they're a customer and you need to respect them. If they want to go and train somewhere else, that's fine. Why would I have an issue with that? Go ahead, go train somewhere else. That's no problem at all. And I think if you're confident in your product, if you're confident in the jiu-jitsu that you teach, that you're doing a good job, that you're passionate and you're delivering a good product, then you shouldn't have any fear of students going off and training other places. I've seen it all the time. I see it a lot with other academies saying, demanding that students, if you leave our academy, you can't come back again, sort of thing. That doesn't work. You can't rule out of fear. It doesn't work. So I've always had a very open door policy, and I've always welcomed anybody from any club, any academy, always welcome to come down and train here. And I say the same to my guys. If you want to go train somewhere else, that's absolutely fine. And we do. We have people that go all over the place training with different academies. If you do a good job, they'll come back. If you don't, then they might leave you for someone else. And that's fine. And you've got to let that happen. The ones that turn around and say you can never come back if you go and train somewhere else, or you're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z, they're going to lose their students because they haven't earned that loyalty, you know? And I think that's very important. I think that closed-minded opinion is what drives people away, not what keeps people.
I almost have imposter syndrome. It's weird.
Who doesn't?
Well, no, it's really weird because I've never had it before. I've always been a super confident person, and it's a learned thing, right, from my job in the Marines. Okay, so you know, I was the quiet guy, like surfing, kept myself to myself. Was never really like emotional, showed emotions or anything like that. And then I became a PTI, which then I had to bring out my inner personality, almost kind of like, you know, the Butlins red coat sort of entertainer. So then, you know, when I'm standing out in front of somebody, it's, you know, I'm the showman, you know, I'm the master of ceremonies. So I have to be there. I have to fluctuate my voice. I have to keep people's attention. So this is going to sound quite strange, I think, is the fact that even though I've been coaching and teaching Jiu-Jitsu, and they said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu then.
It's ingrained in you.
Yeah, it is. Since I've been a blue belt, now when I've got my own school and I've got my own students and I'm teaching it, I go home and I almost kind of go, why am I teaching this? Am I teaching it right? But you know yourself, the way that you teach and you put things across is your own personal experience. It's how you do it. It's not something you can learn from like a handout or a pamphlet or a PDF or learning something from the online tutorials. You know, it's your jiu-jitsu is very unique and personality driven, which is probably why I find the correlation between surfing and jiu-jitsu is so unique and knitted together, because the way that you draw your lines when you're surfing and your own style and your personal take and the boards that you ride is very unique and clicky to you as well.
Right, okay.
So when I'm now teaching, I'm saying this, I actually kind of like kick myself in the face in my head to say, just shut up and get on with it. And it's really, really strange, and I don't understand sometimes why I'm doing it. Look, don't get me wrong, I've only opened the school like in February, but it's a really weird thing to kind of have that kind of imposter syndrome. And even now as a brown belt, I kind of feel probably as people that are like higher belted or whatever, more experienced than I have, they still kind of feel like that now.
Yeah, I completely understand. I'm the complete opposite to you by the sounds of it, in that I've always been incredibly anxious as a child, even as an adult. I get anxiety quite a lot. And I'm introverted. I never wanted to teach. I hate public speaking, all that kind of stuff. Like, I do not enjoy it. But sometimes I have to force myself to do these things. And Jiu-Jitsu has definitely helped build my confidence over the years. Like, having to stand up in front of 40 or 50 students and sort of, you know, confidently give explanations of, you know, why we're doing certain things. I still, to this day, sort of 24 years on, stand in front of a class of like 30, 40, 50 people and have an out-of-body experience. Like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, what is going on? Why are all these people listening to you? Like, you don't know what you're talking about. It still happens. Like, I don't think you ever get over that. And I think it's important. It keeps you grounded, right? It keeps you grounded. In Jiu-Jitsu, you are never the master of everything. Like, you always have something to learn. And I learn all the time from my students. So I try to avoid the trap of being the all-knowing, arrogant instructor. Like, I learn off of my students all the time. just by watching them train, or they come up with an idea and it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I would try and give them a very open-minded perspective on jiu-jitsu if we can, right? I know a lot of instructors teach in a way that, like, you must do it this way. This is the only way to do it. This is the way I'm telling you to do it, and this is what will be best for you. But I try to avoid that as much as possible. I think it's very important to have teach people to learn for themselves, I guess. I'm kind of slightly digressing here from your original point, but I think if people can teach themselves when they learn jiu-jitsu, you give them the ideas, you point them in the right direction, give them the principles, give them some advice, but you don't tell them what they can and can't do specifically. If they learn it themselves, it will stick with them. If you tell them what to do verbatim, then it doesn't tend to land so much, I find. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the imposter syndrome, yeah, I get that all the time. I think it's good. I think it's important, and I think it keeps everybody grounded.
What do you find that your key principles are now with your coaching? Now you've been doing it long enough. Do you feel like you've got like 5 key principles or 3 that you kind of stick to?
I wouldn't say I have any particular principles, because I feel like I'm always developing as an instructor. I feel like I've always got something to learn. It certainly helped build my confidence over the years that the academy has grown, that we have such a great, group of students here. Also having all my black belts around me as well, being able to talk to those guys, share techniques, share ideas, talk about JiuJitsu politics and ethics and things like that. I think it's important to stay ahead of the curve with things like that. It's very easy to fall into what you think, but having all my different black belt instructors, they help keep me honest. I ask their opinions all the time. It's not a dictatorship, as much as sometimes I wish it was. It's not, and I value everybody's opinion. And I think that's really important.
I'm going to ask you a question now that I've always been really, really interested in, but I've always had the fear of asking a black belt, right?
Okay, go for it.
Is gradings.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most under talked about subjects in jiu-jitsu. Now, we have had this conversation before we started. We were saying that grappling and a gentle art like jiu-jitsu is, you should never look for the next belt or for the next stripe, or you should always be just about the art, about training, about being a good training partner and developing your game. But you know this, I know this. Having been given something to show that you're improving is something that we all crave. We all crave, like, oh, well done, mate, that was really good. Yeah. Or, yeah, your top pressure was amazing. I couldn't get out of that, like when you're rolling. So being given another belt or a stripe to show by your instructor, your professor, that you're improving is something that every person that comes to an academy or a jiu-jitsu school that's been there for a while subconsciously craves.
Of course, yeah.
So my question to you is, what are the things that you look at? And I don't want you to break it down into each individual belt, but what do you look at as the headed instructor of an academy, how you grade people?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I talk about this openly all the time in class, because you get a lot of people asking, oh, what have I got to do to get my next tab? What have I got to do to get my next belt? And I like that people are hungry and they want to progress. Everybody wants validation, right? Everybody wants to know that they're improving. They want to progress. Some people need to be held back a little bit, because part of that process is experience. Now, in answer to your question, what do I look at? It's not winning. Like, that is not... Most people think that the more people they beat up, the better they are. What I tend to look at is people's attitudes on the mat. So if someone's getting absolutely smashed, like they're getting like they're having their face knelt on, their neck knelt on, but they're still able to keep calm and smile and move efficiently, not regress into you trying to bench press somebody off them. It's usually, I find, people's defensive jiu-jitsu is a much better indication of their ability than when they're winning. You know, you can have people who are incredibly dominant when they're winning, when they're on the offense, but when they're on the defense, what's their attitude like? Are they calm? Can they keep a cool head? Are they smiling? Are they breathing well? Are they moving efficiently? That's what I tend to look out for most when people are sparring. Attitude, I think, is a huge part of the learning process, as much as academic technique, athletic advantages, just having a good jiu-jitsu attitude, you know, being a good training partner. That's a big thing for me. There's lots of different factors that go into, you know, people's next grade. And I think what I go back to in my head is when I was coming up through the belts, it took me bloody years to get my next belt. You know, I can't remember. I think I was a white belt for like 5 years or something, and then a blue belt for like another 4 or 5 years. It took me forever, partly because there wasn't much instruction around. And for some of those periods, I didn't have instructors. But I often think that people are in so much of a hurry these days. Like, so what? How fast you progress up through the belts? What's the point? You get to black belt, and then what? You're still learning. You're still training. And it's true. I don't tend to tell my students this too much, but when you do get to black belt, it's kind of like you're starting at the beginning. Like that's when you really start learning. It doesn't matter how fast you get there. I never used to get tabs on my belts or anything like that. But these days, people kind of expect that. They need to be validated for that process. They need those constant reminders that they are doing well. They need to be kept motivated. Some people need it too much. And in those instances, I tend to hold them back a little bit until they drop this idea of chasing the belt or chasing the tab, you know. And when I see it I see they've given up. I can see it in their eyes that they've given up. Oh, I'm never going to get this bloody belt. They just give up, and then they just train. And then that's when they get their belt, you know. There's a lot of different aspects that go into it. But I think attitude is as important as the rest of it. Do you think, as you look at it, do you sometimes see it as also like a time served? So, you know, you talking about, you know, you were blue belt for 3 years and a purple belt for 5 years, and you know how that works. Because I've had a conversation with a couple of people about this really, and it's the people that come and train. They're not all from the same walks of life. Some people want to compete all the time. Yeah. Some people just want to come and do it as like a fitness thing. Some people come and do it because it's, you know, it's their outlet. Some people are younger. Some people are older. You're not going to expect the 50-year-old guy to do exactly the same things as the 20-year-old guy is going to be to do, because, you know, he's not necessarily going to be as athletic. Of course, yeah. So do you find doing that between age groups and not necessarily genders, but definitely age groups is something that you look at as well when you're coming to grade people? Yeah, I mean, time served is a big part of it. You know, people who commit to the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, they tend to embrace it, and they may not be particularly fantastic grapplers. But if they love it, if they're good training partners, if they can roll technically, and they've been doing it for a really long time, they have a wealth of knowledge and experience that someone who maybe can run through them in a few seconds won't have. So they know a lot about jiu-jitsu. They have a lot of jiu-jitsu experience. That the most frustrating thing I used to find, I got told by instructors, was you need more mat time. You need more mat time. And I never really understood what that meant. And I do now, and I tell people, but I explain to people what that means now. Sometimes it's just time on the mat. The time on the mat informs an individual about jiu-jitsu, informs them their experiences. You know, you need to have thousands and thousands of different experiences, and you don't get that if you shoot up through the belts too quickly. You don't get those experiences. And controversially, I've seen a lot of very weak belts given out, gradings through different academies around the country. Without naming names or anything, but there's definitely some soft belts that are given out these days. And I don't mean soft in terms of people who are not good athletes, but progressing through the belts too quickly, I think, takes away from what we're trying to achieve.
I think from my perspective, I've thought about this quite a lot, sort of like on my own. And, I was very much like, well, what do I need to do to get to the next belt? And I think definitely between white belt and blue belt, this was very prevalent inside my head.
Yeah.
I was like, right, I need to get to this. So, like you're saying, I was very, very quick to do this and this. So I got to blue belt, I think, within 2 years of being a white belt, but it was just purely because I'd done a little bit of a training-ish. I knew stuff before I'd started, which, a lot of people may do. And then it wasn't until I later, when I was a later blue belt, purple belt, the latter end of being a purple belt, that I actually, this is going to sound really weird, I really started enjoying my jiu-jitsu more. And now as now as a brown belt, you understand the concepts, body movement a lot more. As a coach, I'm always trying to pull people back from going berserk all the time, especially for new people. It's really, really difficult.
Of course, yeah.
But trying to express what not going 100% is to get out of a guard or side control or something when they're not technically able to do that is very, very difficult. But then that's why it's important, I think, as a coach, as an instructor, to train with your students as well, to show that my ability to not be blown at my ass after 5 minutes like you are, because I'm calm, bad situations, I'm letting you try and smash me, but I'm just keeping my frames in, I'm letting you get me into bad situations, but then getting out of them and showing them that this is how you do that, and this is how calm I am while I'm doing it. I also think that's very important as well. Absolutely, to show that aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And if you look at someone and their journey through the various different belt grades, if you were to take those belts away, would they progress in the same way? I think a belt is an indication of an individual's experience within jiu-jitsu, and I think, if you take an art, say, like luta livre, or any other grappling art, and actually, they do get belted in luta livre, but originally there wasn't any belts, and people just grappled to become good grapplers, and maybe giving people belts and tabs and things like that helps them progress, keeps them motivated, but I also feel it takes something away from it a little bit as well. I think it should be more an indication of someone's experiences over time.
What are your thoughts on people competing and not competing?
I think competition is very important. I think if you practice jiu-jitsu or any grappling art, you need to test yourself occasionally, whether that's in the MMA arena or a jiu-jitsu competition or whatever it is. I think if you don't pressure test yourself, you've no idea if it works. It's all well and good rolling around with your mates on the mats and being able to predict and know that you're safe and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, it is a combat sport. It is a martial art, and the only way you can replicate the kind of nerves that you would have in a real fight, in a real combat situation, is to step on a mat against someone that you don't know what they're capable of, and defend yourself. And I think that is very important for progression. It's not essential, definitely not essential. I mean, we have a bunch of people that don't compete and never will compete, and they still develop as fantastic grapplers. But there's something about competition which really opens people's eyes to what jiu-jitsu is and what they need to do to improve their game. I think, pressure testing is very important.
How do you feel that the level of jiu-jitsu and how your game has developed over the years? Because there was a period, of 2 or 3 years where leg locks were, the thing, and Bowler and all these inverted games, which I never got into purely for the fact he used to smash my lower back and my neck as well.
Yeah.
How do you find all of that has changed over the years?
I think it's cyclical. I think these trends they run in cycles. Like I said, I've trained lots of different grappling arts. We used to do a lot of leg locks in Sambo, a lot of wrestling in freestyle wrestling, and I've seen these trends come and go often. And things that we were learning in Sambo years ago, or techniques I was using years ago, suddenly you get some famous social media name is suddenly doing it on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever, and then it becomes the next big thing because someone used it in a competition. And I think it's easy to get distracted with these things. I always say to my students, like, yeah, sure, this guy out there competing, smashing everybody at the World Championships is a really impressive grappler, but don't imitate that guy. Get good at your own jiu-jitsu. If you are imitating someone, it may not be the right thing for you. It may not fit into your game. You may not have the right abilities to be able to do what this guy does. Just concentrate on getting good at what you do, what feels right for you, and you can be that good as well. You don't have to imitate anybody.
I feel like over the years I've done lots and lots of different techniques and been taught lots of different things. One of the key things I always took away from what I got told once was that just be good at a couple of things, but really good at a couple of moves in certain places. And I feel that's kind of how I've used my game over the years, and how I've got to where I am now is because I can never retain information, that much information.
It's never ending, isn't it?
It's relentless. Like, there's so many different people teaching techniques on Instagram, socials. You've got these coaching videos. All those coaching videos have got about 6 to 7 hours. Like, it's 3 films worth of technical instructions. Like, how are you supposed to retain that information? I've never got it. So the way I teach my students now is I say, look, I'm going to teach a couple of techniques in this session. If you take one thing away, whether it's an arm movement or where I put my knee in this, and you do that when you're rolling next, you've learnt something, and put that together over 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, that's how you become proficient. Now, when I train now and I'm rolling, I don't look to go, right, I'm going to do this inverted X-guard, Baron-Bowler, De La Hiva, whatever the fuck it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't look to do that.
It's more organic, right?
It's more organic. So, like, if I'm in a bad situation, I won't go, oh, right, I'm going to try this flower sweep now, or, this butterfly sweep. I'll go, where's their weight?
Yeah, exactly.
Where's their foot? And it won't be a technique that has been taught. It'll be like, right, I've taken a little bit from this one, a little bit from that one, a little bit from here. And I've gone, right, this is where this guy is. How can I get him off me? Where's his weight? And how can I sweep him? Right, let's try that. That hasn't worked. Right, let's try that. Yeah. And that's worked. That's how I feel that my game is now. I don't look at, right, I'm going to do this technique. That hasn't worked. Right. You've got these spider diagrams that people have put out.
Yeah.
Single leg X doesn't work. Go into De La Hiva. Do this with the ankle. If that doesn't work, do this. You've got these different diagrams of how to do things. Yeah. I think that's a kind of a funky way of trying to learn stuff. I
think there's 2 different ways. Some people learn tremendously like that. They have like very analytical brains, and they want to know, A, B, C, D. They need those flow charts. And they can be very effective, but there's 2 different types of jiu-jitsu, I feel. And I think if you're training for a competition, if you're training to win a competition, I should say, then having a very specific direction, a very specific game that you can force people into and then you're into your flow diagram, that's a very efficient way to win a jiu-jitsu match. You know, if you've got a fantastic De La Riva game, and you can force people into your De La Riva, into the grips and the positions that you want, you know you have a higher success rate by doing that. That for me isn't fun. I think jiu-jitsu should be fun, creative, organic, and the type of jiu-jitsu that I do when I'm training with my guys, it's more opportunistic, it's reactive, it's, you know, like you're talking about, if they put their weight over this direction, all right, what can I do for me? How does this feel for me? And that's fun, that's creative, artistic jiu-jitsu. But you have to be able to switch between the two. If you are a competitive athlete, I think it's very important to have a specific game that you can do better than your opponent, and if you can draw them into that game, that's your winning strategy. But that's a different style of jiu-jitsu altogether. So I think it's very important to have the two ideas in your mind and be able to separate them, because you don't want to be training in an open mat session with all your friends. You don't want to be doing the exact same thing that you do in competition, because that's no fun. If you keep ankle locking somebody in the same way, like where's the enjoyment in that? Where's the progression in that? So yeah, I think it's very important to separate the two out.
But that's where people come in peaks and troughs, and this is how I explain what jiu-jitsu is that one day you'll be on the mat and you'll be hitting everything, you'll be doing everything right, and then the next day you'll be at the very bottom of the waved trough.
Yeah.
And you'll be fucking just getting murked by everybody.
Yeah.
You'll be having an absolute shit time. But then that's where you kind of have to be a little bit versatile, and you just turn up for training. You know you're going to have a shit time, or just try and work on something very, very minor. And then slowly, mentally and subconsciously, you'll start coming out of that, you know, that little trough, and then you'll be hitting things again and slowly working to getting better. And that's how I always try and use that analogy of how you learn and how you develop in jiu-jitsu as well.
I mean, if you don't have those lows, how can you appreciate the highs, right? I know a lot of guys who are very, very good competitors, because they spend 90% of their time or 99% of their time winning because they're very, very good. But that means that they're not spending a large portion of their time getting beaten up, getting smashed. So if they do ever end up in those positions where they are getting smashed, they're not as experienced there, psychologically and physically. So I think it's very important to be open with your jiu-jitsu and to get smashed as much as you smash. Like you may know, like when I go to training, I know there's certain people that can do certain things, do certain techniques work really well. But I try something different. Okay, this person's a really good judoka, so I'm going to try and stand with this person. I may get my head smashed through the mat, absolutely, but I want to test myself. You know, I want to enter their game, put myself under pressure so that I can develop as a practitioner. You know, yeah, that's important. You gotta have the lows to appreciate the highs.
What do you train for these days? Obviously, you're the head instructor at Fightworx. You know, when you're training, you know, what are you training for these days?
I had this conversation the other day. Actually, this was quite interesting. If I stopped training now, I think I would probably seize up into an arthritic ball. Yeah, honestly, I feel like jiu-jitsu keeps me mobile. It keeps me semi-fit, and I think I would be far more broken without it. Saying that, I am trying to get back to competition again now. I'm 42, so I haven't got many years of competition left in me, but I miss competing, and I'm finally at a point in my life, even though my back just gave way a couple of weeks ago, where I'm not too injured, and physically I feel like I want to get back out on the competition circuit and yeah, get some more competition matches in.
What are your goals, and how do you see Fightworx evolving in the future?
I love that Fightworx is growing so much at the moment, and I'm looking for other locations to build new academies. I've got a team of really talented instructors and black belts at this academy, and I know each of these guys has aspirations of their own to run their own academy, and I want to try and facilitate that. I want to try and grow academies or build academies in other places and give them the opportunity to go through a similar journey that I had. So if someone can earn a living running an academy and teaching jiu-jitsu, and I have the ability to be able to, facilitate that for them, that's something I'm really interested in doing. Yeah, I really want to do that. I think very highly of my instructors and black belts here. They're really good. They're really talented, fantastic instructors, and all the progression and all the success we've enjoyed with this academy, it's not just because of me, it's because of these guys and the kind of team effort. So I want to see that continue. I want to give them the opportunity to develop their own academies. Some of them are active competitors, and they're very sort of competition orientated, and they want to give that to other people, but they want to pass their experiences on to other students in the same way that I've passed mine on to them over the years.
Well, I'd just like to say, and I'm not saying this because you sat in front of me, I'd call you a prick anyway if I thought you were a prick, but...
Matt's over there.
Yeah, I'm not going on that. I brought McGee.
Not on my back at the moment. It was a bluff.
Talking to you and having conversations with you over the last couple of weeks, and I've known you for years and years and years, but never really had a sit down conversation with you. It's really humbling to listen to like the experience and the knowledge and sort of like the enthusiasm you have for having other people that you've coached over the years to expand what they want to do. And I think that's quite refreshing in this day and age, because this is not aimed at anybody in particular whatsoever, but I think sometimes it's very easy to get into this focus where it's all about me. I need to be successful, and fuck everybody else. I'm going to do what I want to do. But I think also on the flip side of it, I'm a big believer in karma as well. And I think that if you're respectful and you think about other people and you want them to do well as well, I think that counts a million times more than it is somebody that's really passionate about themselves. So, mate, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you, and thank you for putting your experiences across. Well,
thank you, Adz. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm not particularly interested in chat, but I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and thank you for your kind words. I think it is very important. Your other people's success are your success, so I think it's very important to pass that kind of attitude on through your students, and hopefully you'll get the opportunity to do this with your academy. And if you can pass your philosophy and ethics on to your students, then hopefully they'll grow and thrive in the same way. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been great chatting to you, mate. Appreciate it.
And before we finish, where can people come and train, and where can they find you on the internet as well?
So we're at www.fightworx, that's Fightworx with an X at the end, .co.uk, and our main academy is Market Street in Torquay. And like I said previously, anybody and everybody's welcome to come down and train.
Beautiful, Darren. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Adz. Appreciate it, mate.
Cheers, buddy.
Bye.
And that's it. Tune in next week for the 40th anniversary, it's a little bit late, I know, podcast with a Falklands veteran who served in the Royal Marines and saw plenty of action over in the Falklands Islands. Thanks for listening.